Hello and welcome back to the podcast. This is Harmony, your podcast host. Today, I'm going to be talking about optimizing physical and mental health for mothers with the wonderful Gemma Smith. Gemma is a postpartum doula, accredited social worker, mother of three, host of the Postpartum Like a Boss podcast. She's a former HR professional and self-confessed recovering perfectionist. Gemma states that she used to live a fast life, constantly pushing herself well beyond her limits while striving for success. And with that came adrenal fatigue. Then she had her first baby, and the rest is a complicated, messy, profound, and joyful history, which led Gemma to opening her pregnancy and postpartum doula practice called Together. I love that name, Together. It's such a great name
Thank you.
for your practice. So welcome to the podcast, Gemma.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Such a pleasure. So I always start my episodes off with my rapid inspiration questions, just so the audience can get to know you a little bit better. So could you inspire us with what your superpower is?
So when I was thinking about this, I came to the conclusion that I think my superpower is creating connection and community. So right now that's with the new parents, but previous times I have been involved in kind of being the leader or unofficial leader in my mother's group, in wives and girlfriends group for my partner's football, fitness groups at work. And even when I was reflecting as far back as high school, I was somehow always in the leading role for organising events and people, especially around like ceremony and importance of acknowledgement of shared experiences and things like that.
Oh, beautiful. So you're a born leader.
So I don't know how it happened, but somehow it has.
And just even reading like your bio, I don't know if you know much about Ayurveda and the doshas, but I'm like, I think she might have a strong Pitta dosha.
My mum would agree with you. My mum is a qualified yoga teacher, but she teaches other yoga teachers in Australia and New Zealand. So I was kind of brought up with all of that knowledge, and yes, she would thoroughly agree with that.
And what's your favorite quote or mantra at the moment?
So I saw this one the other day on Instagram actually, but it just really kind of encapsulated to me, I think, what a lot of probably new parents feel like, just trying to move forward. So it's by a lady called Victoria Erickson. She is a writer and a poet. It's if you inherently long for something, become it first. So she says, if you want gardens, become the gardener. If you want love, embody love. If you want mental stimulation, change the conversation. If you want peace, exude calmness. If you want to fill the world with artists, begin to paint. If you want to be valued, respect your own time. If you want to live ecstatically, find ecstasy within yourself. This is how you draw it in day by day, inch by inch. And I just loved that.
Me too. I love that. It's so beautiful. It's talking about really embodying what you want to become. So it's amazing. And it's just really well written as well.
Yeah. She's an amazing writer. If you want some more inspiration, check out her stuff, Victoria Erickson.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing. And who or what is inspiring you at the moment other than Victoria?
So at the moment, I have sort of just come out of my own second sort of big postpartum first year. So I'm just really loving having the space to learn again. And I'm listening to an audiobook by Alexandra Sachs and Catherine Burndorf, and it's called What No One Tells You, A Guide to Your Emotions from Pregnancy to Motherhood. And I just love learning new things. So I just am kind of anything that I'm interested in, I just love to fill myself with information, and I can't really get enough of that. And that is something that really fills my cup. So I'm just loving getting to fill my mind with more and more information about how people can better handle and understand the emotions in pregnancy and postpartum.
Beautiful. And what does an inspired life look or feel like to you?
So when I was thinking about this, I think everybody knows that feeling that you get in your gut when something just isn't right. And I think living an inspired life is kind of, I think you know you're doing it right when you don't get that feeling. So yeah, so I think it's about going with that, and if that feeling is telling you.
Right, sorry guys, our recording just completely paused. The internet must have dropped out. But what you were saying is sort of going with your intuition and listening to that gut feeling. And you're so right, because the word inspired itself means in spirit. To live in spirit, to live in that sort of inspirational place, and from coming from that place and living that way, your life will unfold as it's meant to. So 100%. I totally.
Yes, yeah.
Beautiful. So I would love for you to share your story. You have transitioned from a HR professional, a fast living perfectionist, to a pregnancy and postpartum doula. So could you enlighten us with how that all happened?
Yeah. So it kind of started almost when I got pregnant the first time. I had been, I'd just finished my master's. I was overseas, and then spent a few months overseas. I knew it would kind of be the last time that I had time to myself, because I knew when I went home that I would be looking to settle down. And that had always been something that had scared me a bit, because I think my mum had always said, children are wonderful, but they really push you to your limits, and you don't want to do this before you're ready. In hindsight, she shared with me that she had said that because so that I, didn't make that decision when I was, very early 20s. It wasn't meant for when I was closer to 30, but I think it really stuck with me. So there was a lot of apprehension in what it meant for my life, and I knew I would probably be giving up a lot. So when I got pregnant, it happened very fast, and I was really, really grateful for that. But it totally took me off guard, the feeling that I had of like gratitude for it and then just intense fear about it, because I thought, oh, I just don't even know if I'm really ready for this transition. I don't know what it's going to mean, and I'm not ready to kind of lose myself as an individual. So I did do a bit of counselling for that. I'm an accredited social worker, so I really believe in kind of preventative health. So I just did a lot of work around that and kind of got into a better space, but it didn't make the feeling go away. And I had my baby, and I just found that I loved and hated everything at the same time, and that was really confusing. I loved my baby, and I loved the fact that this was happening, and I also just like hated being stuck at home. I hated the changes that were happening, with my body. I hated not being able to do exercise. I had been really sick in pregnancy, so it just felt like I felt a lot of loss around the whole thing, a lot of losing myself. So I think that made me want to probably return to work earlier than some other people. So I actually looked for a new job, went back to work in HR when my son was 10 months old, even though I actually had leave until he was 15 months old. So I went back, and I loved it. I loved being around adults again. I loved the balance that I had between working 3 days and being at home the other 2. So that worked out really well for me. But I think the real kicker was when I got pregnant with my second baby. That was when I realized, I'm probably closer to being able to do something that I want to do. I'd done my social work, and really the reason why I wasn't doing that style of work was because I thought, and for my family, I needed paid maternity leave. So I had stayed in that role to get my first round of maternity leave, and then I was staying in that another HR role to have maternity leave again. And my second baby coincided with COVID. So we were pregnant the November of 2019. And then obviously everything happened in early 2020. So a lot changed in that pregnancy. And I suppose coming out the other side of that, when my second son was born, I realized actually it was healing to have a second child, because you realize how much you learned and how much you grew and how much things had changed and how much I was so much more at ease with my role as a mother. I did know what I was doing. I had a lot of resilience for all the things that you come up against in early postpartum, your sleep deprivation and other things. So yeah, I found that a really healing thing. And I also found it really interesting, because I had two boys and they're completely different. So I think that helped me too, to know that so much of the advice and all the things that you get given, all babies are different, and it's really, there are some things that you can control and there's a whole lot of things you can't. So there's like huge lessons in surrender in motherhood. And I suppose, from there, I just thought, look, I really want to use all my social work skills. I don't want to go back to a job in HR. So I, being on Instagram, I knew what a doula was, but I found a couple of postpartum doulas and I thought, hey, this is awesome, because these people are doing exactly what I would have wanted to have in this whole time, just somebody to be there to help me with practical things after the baby, and just be that sounding board for kind of all the stuff that goes on. So yeah, had a bit of a look into it, did some training while I was on my second maternity leave, and then have kind of tried to figure out how to put that together with my social work. So it's been a bit of a whirlwind, but I suppose when it comes down to it, it's just been, my experience was that there was a fair few gaps in postpartum care in particular. And I'd love to be this sort of person who can kind of fill that with my skill set. And it's really cool that people are more interested in postpartum care now than I think ever before.
Oh, beautiful. I'm sure a lot of mothers will definitely resonate with your story. Like one of the common sort of denominators that I hear a lot is women in my clinic that come in and they say they kind of feel a little bit lost or have lost themselves after having babies. And, I see a lot of women with hormonal imbalances, because that's what I do. And that can also play on your emotions and all of the things that come with that. But one of the big things is that they do feel a little bit lost. Like you can't be the exact same person, because you have gone through such a massive life-changing event and you've brought these beautiful little humans into the world, and you've got a whole nother perspective on life, and your I guess your dharma, or what your sort of goals are in that period of your life is, to raise and look after and learn about how to do all that for a little human being. And it's actually really scary at first, because I remember I had twins, and I had two in the one, so I never got to experience that second sort of pregnancy and birth where I felt like I knew what I was doing. I just felt like I was fumbling the whole way through. And I remember when I first gave birth to them and I was in the hospital and they were preemie, and one of the midwives said to me, I might have misunderstood what she said, but what came across to me was, don't handle them too much, because they're going to be really tired and they're so small and so little. I think just in this first day or so, was what she was trying to say, just give them some rest. And anyway, one of them started crying, and I was like in the room by myself. I'm like, oh shit, what do I do? Like, do I just let him? She said not to handle him too much. What do I do? And I was and I'm a nurse as well. And I'm like, it just felt so foreign to me. And then I was almost going to call them and go, my baby's crying. I'm like, oh my God, you absolute idiot. Like, this is your child. It just felt like such a foreign, because I was used to looking after babies in the emergency department. Like, I was an emergency nurse, but when it came to my own and it started crying, and I was like, holy dooly, like, what do I do here? So it is such like a massive learning curve. And yeah, I did pick him up and he was fine. And, we bonded. It was beautiful. And I realized, no, and then I think she came in and she said, no, definitely pick them up when they're crying, because I had explained what had just happened. She goes, no, we don't mean it like that. I just misunderstood what she meant by don't handle them too much let them rest, or whatever it was.
Yeah. It's something that if even people who have worked, I suppose like you as a nurse, but there's lots of people who've worked in childcare or as nannies who really feel so prepared for parenthood, and then they have that moment in the hospital like, wow, this is like not the same as
Yeah.
helping other people's children or, you know, dealing with other babies. There's something that fundamentally changes when it's your own and it's all on you and you need to figure out what to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, yeah, and that time is so important for bonding as well. So when we sort of cleared up what she meant by that, as in not handling the baby all the time, she didn't exactly mean that. So she did mean to, you know, have skin on skin time and do all those things and feed. But I was also really upset because one of the boys, he actually had to go and get some care, like he was in the special care nursery for a bit, and not being able to touch him and straight away and get the skin on skin connection and all of that, that also made me feel really, really upset. And I was already in this sort of twin mom divide with, oh my God, I can't be giving all the attention to this one, and what's happening with my other baby, and all of those sort of anxiety and thoughts that I just never knew were going to surface as soon as you have your baby. And everyone's journey is so different. And like you said, you can get all the advice, and some well-meaning advice is absolute crap.
Yeah.
I do remember someone saying to me, like, you can get people will tell you all the advice, but you'll never understand it until you actually have your baby. And it's so true, because they are different. And my boys, even though they're twins, they're so different. They've got different needs and they've got different personalities. And yeah, you're spot on there with the advice being here.
Yeah. It's pretty wild. I think a lot of people, I think even when I was pregnant, you know, you really want to know, but it's very hard to visualize.
Yeah, absolutely. And just for those that don't know what a doula is, could you please explain what a doula does and what they are?
Yeah, sure. So the term doula was kind of coined by this sociologist in the late 60s. Her name was Dana Raphael. So it comes from a Greek word that means to serve, or a woman who serves, usually another woman who's pregnant. But basically today it sort of means non-professional people, non-medical professional people, who assist families in the transition from pregnancy to parenthood. So that's in emotional support, practical support, and informational support. And that can kind of be for home visits, for conversational catch-ups, or even planning and preparation for your birth. So yeah, doulas can provide all sorts of things, and you'll usually see with doulas in Australia that people are either a birth doula or a postpartum doula. Birth doulas do focus a lot more on preparation for the birth, and they usually attend the birth, whereas postpartum doulas usually focus on preparation for early parenthood and being there after you've had your baby. So they're two pretty distinct groups.
Absolutely. I actually did my postpartum doula training in my Ayurvedic medicine training.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's really cool. And I loved it. And I remember when I was learning all about it, I was like, oh my God, like this is the service I needed. I was a little bit stubborn. Like I didn't have and get a lot of help, but it's something that I really, really wish I had have done. It would have made life so much easier. And I think it's just such a beautiful service, and just being able to connect to another sort of woman as well, or male if it's a male doula, but just another adult that comes in and can share that experience with you and be really supportive. I think it was just amazing. So I remember learning about it thinking, wow, I really wish I had that service. And although it's not something I do now, I usually see mothers a little bit later. I just think it's people like yourself who are providing that. It's just going to be such a growing industry, and it's just a wonderful service to offer. So I guess it comes to that question is, you know, why is it so important to have that extra support postpartum?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many reasons, but when I was thinking about this, I think mainly because postpartum, like we've just discussed, is a time of like huge shifts for people. So a lot of those shifts are really positive. Recently I put up on my Instagram, I do like little visualizations that have a bit of a wheel and talk about different emotions. So one of them was talking about joy, and it was talking about that people might find that they love and bond with their baby, that they are taking lots of pride in themselves around their birth. They might feel a lot of satisfaction and relief about their baby being here. They might be loving sharing their baby with family and friends. They might enjoy seeing their partner thriving as a new parent, and they might have drastic changes in their perspective and life outlook, and that can be all really great. And on the flip side to that, people can feel resentment because with the loss of freedom in early postpartum, it can be really hard not to resent people who have more freedom than you. People can feel a lot of anxiety with their new responsibility, like we were just talking about, the responsibility of care for your newborn. You can feel quite lost and lonely at the same time, feel really isolated in your experience. And with sleep deprivation, you can become a lot more confrontational. You can be tense, you can feel overwhelmed and more mad and frustrated than normal. Obviously, as you know, this is your job, but dealing with the huge hormonal shifts that are happening at this time. So I think the main reason why it's good to have support is that coping with the duality of those feelings, as well as all the shifts and physical recovery, it's just such a huge moment. And I think it's not something that has been well supported in the past. I don't think people have really honoured what it means. There's really only just started to be even discussions about, hey, I can feel really amazing and grateful and also like very angry and feel like this is really hard all at the same time. So I think, in terms of why doulas are great for this, because there's a set support time. So you've set times where you know that we're coming. So that's helpful to have something to look forward to. That we also don't have expectations of you as a new mum if we're coming to be with you. You know, friends and family knew you from before, and they might expect you to host them or expect you to act in a certain way, or be expecting you to love it or be expecting you to hate it. And maybe that's not your experience. Whereas as a doula, I'm not expecting anything. I'm just expecting you to have your own experience, and I'll be there to kind of honor whatever that is. And as a doula, we come with sort of a network of people we know who might be able to help in certain areas. And I think, coming right back down to it, it's just normalizing this experience. I think so many people feel all of these things and then also guilt because they are like, I shouldn't be feeling like this in this time that's supposed to be happy.
Absolutely. And I think in more traditional times, you know, a community, like when a woman gave birth, it was a big thing, and a community really came in to support her. And it was just through the transition into this more modern life and career focused and just the busyness of life, really, and also having to be that strong woman and independent woman, it's made us feel that we've had to also be like that as soon as we've given birth to a child. And you can feel guilty or shameful even admitting that you need help, and it's not as easy or as fairy tale as we may have dreamt it to be. So I think it's really important just to acknowledge those feelings and be heard, and just having that support person. I know when I did my doula training, my Ayurvedic doula training, it was like all about sort of the psychosocial and not just the physical, but the sort of mental and emotional aspect that you really support with. And also like the food, and making sure that the mother is also nourishing themselves. Not only nourishment, but also being nurtured, because you're giving all of yourself to this little baby and learning this whole new process. And I think that a doula can come in and really help facilitate that and be the nurturer for that mother, which is also really amazing. So in your experience, what would you say is the number one thing that new mothers need support with?
Yep. So I think overarchingly, it is the processing of that expectation versus reality situation and kind of the ever changing nature of the new role. So just having some sort of constructive outlet to kind of sit with and work through that. But I mean, obviously there's the main things are around like sleep and settling, baby feeding, the lack of freedom that you might have, and some anxiety around, especially around the health of your baby. And then practical support is the other main thing that's really helpful at this time. And that is just needed so that the mother can rest or fill her cup in some way. It could be that she actually wants to be able to cook something herself without a baby screaming, and so it could be that I'm holding her baby, or it could be that I can cook some food so that she can rest. And I think having those two things, making sure that people are having enough rest or having some moments to look after themselves in whatever way they need, as well as just a real outlet to process those changes. But I think when circling back to what we were talking about before, some of the outcomes that they've seen are good when you have support. You have a higher chance of successful breastfeeding, just because of having the support. And also it decreases lots of risk factors associated with postpartum mental health issues. And both of these things are important because there's some stats around women in Australia. So 96% of women initiate breastfeeding, but less than half of those will be exclusively breastfeeding at 3 months postpartum. I think it's just one of the things that isn't talked about a lot, the demands of it. Often people think of like breastfeeding is free, formula costs money, and that's kind of how we're talking about it. But actually there's a huge amount of support people need in breastfeeding, and you would know that through just nutritionally. That's a huge piece. So I think, the number one thing that new mothers do need support with is the emotional side of things. But as you know, so many things can help with that are physical, about rest and nutrition.
Absolutely. And for our mothers listening, could you give us your top tips on how they could optimize their mental and physical health postpartum?
Yeah, sure. So I think, and as you would probably be aware, those two things are quite intrinsically linked. So in terms of mental health, having a support outlet is just very important. So it could be that you're calling something like the perinatal anxiety and depression hotline, which is called the PANDA hotline, or you talk to your GP or get formal counselling, or it could be that you just have a certain trusted person in your life who can give you some support. Other than that, practical support is really important for mental health because it's setting yourself up to be able to kind of like identify and optimize what help you can get. And it could be using friends and family, or it could be things you could do for yourself. You could cook meals in bulk so that you're not having to put yourself under stress every night of the week. Or, obviously some people do pay to outsource things like cleaning or gardening, or I think we're all loving click and collect groceries or delivered foods. So I think that's something that as a postpartum doula, I do a lot of in the planning, just trying to figure out where we can lighten the load so that when you're under more load as a new parent, we can do those things. And then in terms of physical health, obviously movement is the number one thing that everyone can be doing. This can be really tricky in pregnancy and in postpartum because you may lack time and energy, but then at the same time, that's the double-edged sword. If you don't do it, then it sort of almost gets worse. So I've found things, obviously yoga and Pilates and walking are 3 really great things that can be done quite safely with the right providers over the pregnancy and postpartum period, and even done online. They're really great, so that you can meet other people who are in the same situation, and build some connections. I've also found that when you're doing things to optimize physical or mental health, it's really good to have things actually booked in. So obviously you can buy things where you can participate online, but sometimes it's really good to have live things, or things that are really going to make you show up. And then there's the getting outside element. So any form of contact with nature has lots of benefits for calming our nervous system, and quieting our minds. So I suppose the ultimate thing for physical and mental health is being able to get outside into nature and move. So going for a walk in nature, when it comes down to it, is probably the easiest and most effective thing to do in pregnancy or postpartum, if you're looking for the quickest fix for both.
I think even like pregnancy, postpartum aside, it's one of the it's one of the most sort of quickest way to sort of center the mind and the body together, isn't it?
Totally.
Absolutely wonderful tips. Thank you so much for sharing all that. Really appreciate all of the information. You've been amazing to have on, and I'm sure a lot of the ladies listening who are new moms are going to get so much out of this. So could you explain a little bit more about the services you offer and where our listeners can find you?
Yeah, so So I am offering a mixture of my postpartum doula support and my perinatal counselling, which is what I'm offering as an accredited social worker. But basically there's going to be 4 levels of support. So I offer guidance for first-time parents on how to navigate their decisions and optimise their support in line with goals and values. So that's my first level, and that's postpartum planning. It's a 2-hour session. Then the second is my online doula support. So that's a package of ongoing telephone and online check-ins. And that's where we focus on just connection, support, resource sharing. And that's something that we can do as you welcome your baby or as the baby grows. The third is in-home support. So this is for people who are based in Brisbane, because that's where I'm based, wanting practical support in their homes. And that's obviously really great for people who don't have access to support from friends and family when they welcome their new baby. And the fourth is the perinatal counselling piece, which is available during pregnancy and up to 12 months postpartum, where we can confidentially discuss any challenges that you're experiencing through pregnancy or around birth or postpartum. And that one has a Medicare rebate attached. Everybody's eligible for 3 Medicare rebated services. So that's really good, and something that many women don't know about. It's not attached to any mental health plans either. So it's something that you can do. It's also something that you can do for any pregnancy, no matter the outcome. So I think it's very important for people to know about. And you can find me on Instagram at together.pnp, or my website, which is www.togetherpnp.com.au.
Thank you so much. And I will put your website in the show notes so people can just click and get straight to you. I really appreciate you coming on and taking the time, even though we had a lot of internet cutouts. So,
dramas.
Yeah, so hopefully it's not too choppy this episode. We've had to be like, pause, the internet's cut out, and re-get on. But that's life, right? It just happens.
Yeah,
so,
that's true.
Yeah. But yeah, thank you so much. And thank you to all of our listeners for listening to the episode. And if you know of somebody who may benefit from hearing this episode, please share it and give us a 5-star rating if you enjoyed it. Namaste.